All right, well, we talked about it. It's time. We're here. Now, if you're tired of me saying this and some other things throughout this seminar, that's okay because you remembered it. If you've learned nothing else, there's some of the things we talked about, maybe kind of over your coach's eye on analyzing movement and other things, take away this setup and the other setups. This is a tried and true method for us to start at a pre-setup series, build tension throughout the body, and acclimate to the load while priming our core and breathing and bracing correctly, rooting our feet, all these key points that everybody knows in a methodical fashion so you can repeat it on the platform, your athletes can repeat it on the platform and or the gym. Now, as always with these, this is not set in stone. I'm gonna say it's pretty close to set in stone, but it's not. Brandon might tweak a thing a little different than me, or might reverse order or tie some things in at the same time. That's okay. You might take it and be like, hey, I have a problem with the lifter. I really want them to root their feet, stomp their feet, root their feet when they walk up to the bar. If that's what they need and you need, cool. What you can't do, obviously, is breathe and brace while the deadlift bar is halfway to your knees. It's not gonna go well. So remember, there is some variability with this, but we really want to fine tune it and don't play with it and always adjust it. If you make some changes, stick with those changes so you can always be consistent with your setup. Anything to add to setups before we jump right in and actually cover our 8 steps of the deadlift?
Yeah, so we're going to talk a lot about tension building, and I'm sure many of you have seen that played out at a meet many, many times, but one thing I have to remind everybody is that when we show our tension building phase and the total of our setup, what you'll notice is the barbell pops up off the floor very early. There's no real bar bend, so we talk about bar bend and we talk about the setup mechanics. Just understand this would look very differently with a kabuki deadlift bar, especially with 500, 600, 700 pounds on the bar. It'd look very differently. So for today, my back's hurting a little bit. I don't want to train in this video necessarily, so we're just going to throw around 135. But if this is a working load, if we had 600 pounds or so on there, you'd really see the totality of effects that comes with our tension building phase. So just remember that little grain of salt there.
Conventional and sumo, the tension building series is going to be the exact same. We've already covered the differences of stance and body size and other things like that. So keep consistent with what you're doing, relationship to the bar, all those things, but nothing has to change. Just because we're both sumo lifters, that doesn't mean this is the sumo setup, right? This tension building series is going to be the exact same. All right, so you should have learned it already. Hopefully you're already thinking, I know step 0. What is it? It's alignment. We need to make sure, now there's less stuff going on, the barbell's on the floor, but let's make sure we're centered to the bar, left to right, our feet are equal left to right, right to left, toe angle's correct, position that we've already taught you, forward to back in relation to the bar is there. For platform experience, another one of our high-level pro tips. If you notice you've been on a platform that's seen some wear and tear, maybe multiple days at nationals or worlds with heavier loads, or maybe some plywood that's been to 1 or so meets, and you notice the bar is sitting in divots, that can alter your setup. Some lifters don't care. They're going to run out there, build tension, grip and rip, whatever they do. Maybe it's not a big enough deficit to cause them problems. But the reason I say deficit, I've looked across the platform before at the divots and literally seen, red plates sitting a ½ inch deep into a platform. Now, again, some people may not even feel that difference. It may not adjust their top load, so they don't think about it. But if you're not set up perfectly in alignment to that bar, if you're a roller, or what Brandon showed earlier, and maybe you're too close to the bar, so when you go to wedge in, your bar is going to go forward. If it's stuck in the divots, you will not be able to move that bar well and articulate it in the position that it needs to. So everybody thinks about the divots just as being a deficit, but if you need any shifting of that barbell, it is not going to happen. So coaches, pay attention to that. The lifter can ask for that bar to be moved. They can also roll that bar forward or back and move it themselves. Lastly, on that note too, make sure that if you are a bar mover or a roller, you don't roll it into a divot you didn't know was there and roll it right into yourself. Anyways, step 0 done. We've got alignment. So this is very nice because unlike squat and bench, we have the opportunity to set a muscular brace and even give ourselves a tactile cue. You can't do that when there's a squat bar on your back, and when you're getting under the bench bar building tension, it's kind of hard to feel, right? Bring a hand off and check that. So very nice here, and a lot of people rush their deadlifts. We've already talked about it. We see it all the time on the platform. This is that last calm before the storm. Muscular brace, air, we start to hinge and go. So step number 1, set initial brace. Rib cage over pelvis, and a neutral spine. And what we don't want is Brandon to do everything right but this, right? Rounded head, forward head. We want to make sure that when we're setting our brace, if we're a forward head person, we're also taking time to pack that head and getting nice neutral spine. Remember, Brandon talked, neutral is a range, so we're not looking for perfect, but we want you to be standing erect here. Set that brace. Now, number 2, we can hinge to the bar. Go ahead and hinge for me. Brace is set, good spinal position. Notice how much of a hip hinge that is. This would not be an ideal deadlift start position, and that's okay. We want you to hinge to the bar. So here, step number 3, we'll go ahead and set our grip. We've talked a lot about grip. You can look left, right, one more time. We know that we need to also depress our scapula or engage lats. This is already going to start to put some tension into that bar. Number 4, this is our last chance. Brace. Breathe into that brace, reinforcing IAP. Rooting the feet here. We already see some external rotation that happened. And then we create more tension into the bar. So Brandon's going to start to press his feet into the floor, pull the bar up a little bit. You might have heard the clank. And here we wedge hips into the bar. And execute. Now, Brandon already touched base with it, so I'm going to stop there for a quick second and talk about those sequences before we roll through 1 or 2 more times at a faster rate and then turn it over to Brandon. Notice how when we're creating tension into the bar, it's done in this position. This is a horrible deadlift because I just went straight up. I never tried to achieve a superior position. So we're not saying just stand up. But once my lats are engaged, feet are rooted, external rotation, before I start to wedge, I create some tension into the bar. Then I can start to wedge, 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 wedge. You saw it here, and Brandon paused because he knows what we're talking about. I didn't have to tell him to pause. You might have even seen after the pause a little shift and then execute. So the point that I have to make here is somewhere between creating tension into the bar. If it's really light, you know, just by putting a lot of tension in the bar in a horrible bent over position like this, the bar might start to come off the floor. That's not bad. You should be okay with that with your warm-ups because we don't want to change things. But when we wedge our hips into the floor, guaranteed lighter weights, the bar is popping up. That does not mean you execute the lift as soon as you feel the bar start to move. That's a big no-no, conventional or sumo, I promise. The stronger lifter you are, and by that, you know, not gauging my strength versus his or anybody else's watching this, we know, seeing some massive deadlifts, a 1075 that just got pulled, the stronger you are, the more that bar bends. Now, everyone needs to be patient, but the more flex you get out of a deadlift bar, the more patient you need to be with lighter weights because it's going to already come off the floor and you're not in your normal position. If you're only deadlifting 200 pounds because you're a beginner or like me or coming back from an injury, that may not be the end of the world because you can get to that position and stand up. But if you're used to pulling 5, 6, 7, 800 pounds or more, or your clients are, with warm-ups that are going through the sequence, 99% of the time they'll rush it because they felt the bar move and they thought they should just execute and smash through quickly. No. When I take him back through, watch how patient he is. He doesn't even care what the bar is doing. He's looking to feel that ideal position, getting into the very best position possible that would only happen if it was off of blocks, really, really bent bar, or in a pause warm-up like this. Then, when he knows there is no better position for him today, execution happens. All right. Enough on that. It's just a really important point with that tension building sequence, how that actually comes to light when we pull the bar off the floor. All right, let's roll back through. Walk up to the bar for me. We're looking for alignment. We're checking in. Bar's loaded correctly. No divots on the floor. We're happy, left, right, front, center. Now we're gonna set our initial brace. This is rib cage over pelvis position, but this is also our last chance to check in with our head and make sure we're remembering what neutral spine is before we try to deadlift something heavy. All right, now when that muscular brace is set, we can hinge to the bar. Step number 2. For hook grip or mixed grip, we want to do all of our grip stuff, make sure that's aligned correctly. We shouldn't be in a rush still. We're going to depress our scapula or engage the lats. This is our last chance to brace and breathe into that brace, finishing IAP. Feet are rooted. There's some external rotation. We set initial tension into the bar, and that gives something Brandon to anchor off of as he starts to wedge his hips in. Best position, execute. And right when I would have told him to go, he went. Now, we've got to coach and train together a lot, so I know right what his position looks like, but it was beautiful to see because right when I was getting ready to tell you to go, I could see, like, you pause there for a quarter second, you're like, yep, money, and up we go. All right, walking through one more time quickly, I'm gonna turn it over to Brandon. We always wanna check our alignment, calm down. If you like to lift aggressively, you probably should not get fired up until you start to create tension into that bar, in my opinion. So, we set our initial brace, rib cage over pelvis, head position. We're gonna hinge to the bar, set our grip, engage our lats. We're gonna root our feet. Excuse me, we're gonna breathe and brace here first. I got ahead of myself. We're gonna root those feet, create initial tension in the bar, start wedging those hips underneath, wedge, 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 and when we're ready, execute. So note how I said root feet before brace, and again, there's one of those easy ones, like if he really focused on his feet and then braced right before, those are probably pretty interchangeable. If you get some of those really out of order, it's not gonna help a ton. Brandon, what do you have to add for us, deadlift setup?
Yeah, so one of the biggest competition mistakes I see people make, and this is so incredibly consistent, and it's kind of a sore spot for me right now because I had one athlete that did not compete as well as they could have because of this exact issue, so I have to touch on it. When it comes to deadlift specifically, you'll see athletes have a very specific approach to their setup, a cadence of cues they follow every single time, and they get really amped up and everything goes out the window. In fact, the exact example I saw, to give you a quick visual here, is entire prep, he was here. Entire prep, he was methodical, he was perfect, started in neutral spine position, beautiful. And the second he got to competition, getting ready to pull a world record, dude, what are you doing? But he missed it, and you want to know why? Because his position was different. He had zero adaptations, nor should he have, in that position, and he had terrible lockout issues because of this, and this happens all the time. It's just one example that explains many different individuals that consistently have this issue. So the biggest thing we need to realize is we don't need to get, in fact, being amped up can come with a lot of detriment if you don't know how to control it. You should have the same approach, the same cadence, the same everything when you get on stage, and this is the case with every lift, of course, but I have to specify this with the deadlift specifically. It's the last lift of the meet, so when everybody gets amped up for it, it's honestly kind of the funnest. You know, everybody gets crazy for it, but here's the thing, we still have to be focused and stick to the exact same approach. Now, when it comes to bar bend, this is something I really like to talk about because there are some great lifters out there that do not quite realize this. Really strong individuals. There's one in particular that I'm thinking of that shall go unnamed, but there's many lifters, high-level lifters, that get injured in prep because of one specific reason. They are impatient. Okay, the stronger of an individual you become, the more patient you have to be. Speed comes with time, but here's the cool part about the deadlift, it doesn't have to come in the first place. So when you first learn how to play a sport, any sport really, throw a punch, do a rock over step in wrestling, throw a baseball, you name it. Any motor action you learn growing up, what does your coach say? Go slow, speed comes with time. In fact, I remember when I was learning how to pitch, it was taking steps, this, then this, and this, and this. It was taking steps, and it was very slow. And every time I rushed the pace, what would happen? It fell apart. So my coach would repeat, speed comes with time, go slow. But again, with the deadlift, there's some great deadlifters out there that don't set up that quick. There's some that do set up quick as well, but the speed not only comes with time, but it has to be earned. So for example, I get maybe a 5 to 7% increase in top end load when I set up quicker. But here's the thing, that Increase in load has zero benefit unless I can control that speed. It only comes with detriment as far as that speed goes. So I have to earn it, and for me personally, I handle load better when I set up quicker, but it took me literally months upon months upon months, if not years, to earn the right to set up fast and still maintain mechanics. And that's another big mistake we see people make, is they're just going too fast. So when you're a high level lifter, especially, you're dealing with a lot of weight especially, if you do not take the totality of bar bend out of that bar, you will get whipped forward every single time, especially with the kabuki deadlift bar. And, you know, it's one of those things where the kabuki deadlift bar, you're basically deadlifting off blocks if you take all the tension out. If you don't, you're going to build a decent amount of tension, but that extra bar bend is going to whip you forward at the start, throw you out of position, ends up being a good morning to get it up. So even in competition, you know, let's earn the right to go fast. If you like to go fast, that's great, but we still need to take the totality of bar bend out. If you don't, it's going to come with severe detriment.
With setup, one of the bigger things we see with different setups is athletes breathing and bracing completely before they descend into the bar. And I'm not saying grip and rip, I'm saying an athlete, conventional or sumo, who gets full air, goes down and does their thing. Now, if you've earned that right, I'm okay with it. I really am. But for coaches, when you're working with newer athletes, if they watch somebody who does that, remember our reinforce. In squat and bench, we have a time, once the bar's out, walked out over here, we reinforce everything. Here, we're kind of reinforcing everything before we wedge into the bar, because as it's coming up, if you have a problem, you're going to get red lights, or the lift isn't going to go well and you're still going to get red lights, right? There's no way to really fix it and reinforce position on the way up, because you should have had your ideal position off the ground. So there's nothing inherently wrong with that. I've played with it before. I feel like if I'm being very patient in my setup and being very methodical, I know I'm not running out of air, because I used to lift multiply, and in a long squat setup, I felt like I was going to panic and run out of air. And you watch it on video, I was like, dude, that was 3 seconds before you started descending. If you can't hold your breath for 6 seconds, we have other problems that we have to fix. But if you feel rushed, athletes will take a gaspy breath of air, or they'll rush their setup. So the one caveat to that, just wanted to point it out, adding what Brandon's talking about, earning that right to go fast. Set up slow. Breathe, brace, reinforce down there. Even if it's a full breath up here, and when you get down, you're like, all right, I'm going to get ready to go. Hold the brace. Air in and out. You've refreshed that. Brain has fresher oxygen. It's not as panicked. Wedge, 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 wedge. Do the rest of your thing and take off. So thanks for adding that.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's one other random fault I would hate myself if I didn't mention, and that is when it comes to pre-tensioning does not mean getting out of spine alignment or good position. This is such a common one, such a common one. Me and Kyle actually talk about this quite often. Pre-tensioning is this here. Just a little bit of tension. I'm using my hip extensors and knee extensors to create a little bit of tension before creating more and more and more as I pull into position. This is not pre-tensioning. I don't know why, but there's so many lifters that bias towards that, and oftentimes they breathe in that position too, looking something like this. And then just dive bomb into position. This is a problem. Not only can we not brace as effectively as we otherwise could while in severe spine flexion, but also it encourages people to just dive bomb in position, oftentimes creating no tension. So keep in mind, when we talk about pre-tensioning, applying that little bit of tension before going through our setup, it should not come with positional degradation. Instead, it should come with just a little bit of tension that has zero change or deviation in spine position.
I like it. All right, guys. Hopefully you learned a ton, or at least a couple easy tips where you can help yourself and your athletes go through a methodical setup. And remember too, with warm-ups, especially on big meets, because we've talked about it, if you see your athletes rushing their deadlift warm-ups on meet days, stop them and slow them down. If you rush them, or I shouldn't say rush, if you're a faster lifter like Brandon's talking about, he earned the right to get there. If you're a faster lifter in training, keep them the same on competition day. We see more with squats and bench. I feel like on the platform, or warm-ups to the platform, especially at big meets, it's usually people just, making bad weight attempt jumps and kind of rushing their attempts, but their squat kind of looks like their squat. Most people's bench kind of looks like their bench unless they're rushing pause and blowing commands, things like that. But again, we start watching people warm up in the back, and all of a sudden it's like, how fast can guys rip 1, 2, 3, and 4 reds to the point where conventional or sumo, they're bouncing it off and throwing it down, getting all hyped up. If you don't train like that because you were methodical all prep, you're throwing yourself off. If you do train like that, or athletes do, let's get them to stop that so they can learn all these sets to practice ideal technique, and we shouldn't rush through. Usually what we see is the example Brandon gave again, just to recap, a lifter who's very methodical in training, and then they get hyped on meet day, and all of a sudden it's just not grip and rip, but once that bar leaves the floor, it's like, how explosively can I pull these? And then you watch their third attempt, even if they're a pretty fast deadlifter, and it's not moving at half or a quarter that speed. So remember, this setup and all of our setups are to give you something where you can be very consistent and concise with, but also methodical with those warm-ups. So we hope this helped. Let's jump over to our movement prep for the deadlift. We'll see you there.